Hi, this is Reverend Dr. Nadine Rosechild-Sullivan, and welcome to tonight. Welcome to Sunday. What is this, the 8th of November? Yes, the 8th of November. And it's been quite a week. I know it's been a week for you. I know that it's been just absolutely nerve-wracking. Tuesday was just so intense. And Monday leading up to Tuesday, and then Tuesday into late night, and then nightmares all night Tuesday night, not knowing how this was going to turn out, and then Wednesday and Thursday and Friday just hanging on tenterhooks, waiting for the call, waiting. And then yesterday, Saturday morning at about 11:30ish, little news thing, been watching for days, and they just kept keeping those electoral college counts the same. And then suddenly it was like, oh, okay, wait, they called it. And when they called it, CNN called it moments before MSNBC, and when CNN called it, it was just such relief. And my adrenaline's still high, my heart's still beating too fast, my respirations are still too shallow, but just beginning to sort of let go and let down just a little, just beginning to go, okay, wait, we're going to be okay. So I'm wearing my celebratory, it is a new year, it is like New Year's Eve or New Year's Day. It is like, this is a new chance for America, a new chance to get back to what most of us have cared about and done whatever our part is in working toward across our lifespans, to just simply get back into that space where we are, absolutely working for rights and equality, believing in each other, being inclusive, just back into that space. And so this is my Ruth Bader Ginsburg I Dissent color, and just something festive, and just, being in this place, right? Like just taking a moment and enjoying this. And so I want to take a minute, and I want to read for a minute from Vice President-elect Kamala Harris's statement as from her acceptance speech. And so if you'll just allow for a moment for me to, or for a number of moments, for me to put on my sociologist hat and play that role, and then later I'll metaphorically switch over to my clerical collar, though it'll still be Ruth, but switch over and we'll do our meditation. And because there's more things for us to be working toward, things to keep visualizing, things to keep putting our faith out there for, things to keep reaching out into the ether and drawing in this, the solidity of a return to decency and forward motion on the issues that most affect our actual lived experience in this century in the United States or wherever you are in the globe. So just Kamala Harris in her statement, or Vice President Harris, said in her statement, she quoted and she said, Congressman John Lewis, before his passing, wrote, "Democracy is not a state, it is an act." And what he meant was that America's democracy is not guaranteed. It is only as strong as our willingness to fight for it, to guard it, and never take it for granted. And protecting our democracy takes struggle. It takes sacrifice, but there is joy in it, and there is progress, because we, the people, have the power to build a better future. And if you think about whatever it is you've witnessed across your lifespan, we talk in social justice movements about how we make 2 steps forward and then there's backlash and we get knocked back a step. But the fact is we always are 1 step forward. We don't get knocked back 2 steps. It looked bad. As somebody who cares about human rights, civil rights, it looked bad. these past 4 years. I have spent, since somebody descended an escalator and said Puerto Ricans weren't citizens and began to talk about murderers and rapists coming from Mexico and them not sending their best, and announced his candidacy for the presidency, my heart has been in my throat, my stomach has been in my throat, just like a bucket of cold fear, right? And the whole time. And my grandsons would really like it if I watched the news just a little less, because my YouTube feed shows up on their YouTube feed, and I tend to get it on YouTube because I tend to be running around, and so they're the news shows I, subscribe to and call up, but I'm not usually in a position to be in front of a television set. Before the pandemic, I was mostly in my car going to campus or back, and or busy in a way where, my phone can be my little TV, right? So they'll be really glad if I do just a little less of that, though we can't stop being vigilant, as per John Lewis's and Vice President Harris's point, right? Democracy takes work. We fight for democracy. I did my dissertation on the fight for same-sex marriage, for marriage equality. And, watch that fight intimately across, basically from 99 or 2000 all the way up past my dissertation to 2015. And it's coming back again because Amy Coney Barrett and Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito have all expressed the thought that Obergefell versus Hodges, which was our Supreme Court case that gave us the right to marriage, should be struck down. So it ain't over. I knew it wasn't over when Mike Pence was elected vice president. But even with their exit, there are still things, there's still stuff going on, right? SCOTUS has still been altered radically by the death of RBG and by the addition to the court and the 3 additions that have been made in the past 4 years. And so there's a lot of work to do going in the future. I want to read a few more of her comments. So I have selectively edited and taken some things so I can just get to the points I'm getting to. I'm not like thanking my husband and Joe and all of that, right? So just central points. So Vice President-elect Harris said, I'm thinking about the generations of women, Black women, Asian, white, Latina, Native American women who throughout our nation's history have paved the way for this moment tonight. Women who fought and sacrificed so much for equality, liberty, and justice for all, including the Black women who are often, too often, overlooked, but so often prove that they are the backbone of our democracy. And Black women in Philadelphia really kicked it home this week, this whole election week instead of a day. All the women who worked to secure and protect the right to vote for over a century. Actually, we worked for 72 years to get the right to vote, and it's been a century since we got it. 100 years ago with the 19th Amendment, but the fight starts in 1848. 55 years ago with the Voting Rights Act, and that fight starts the minute Reconstruction is ended in the South after the Civil War, so 1876-ish. Whatever. I always forget whether Reconstruction was 9 years or 11. 55 years with the Voting Rights Act, and now in 2020 with a new generation of women in our country who cast their ballots and continue the fight for their fundamental right to vote and be heard. Tonight I reflect on their struggle, their determination, and the strength of their vision to see what can be unburdened by what has been. To see what can be, what we can make of this democracy we've been handed. As Elijah Cummings is reputed to have said, no, it wasn't Elijah Cummings. Maybe it was George Washington. You've got a democracy. Pelosi quotes it a lot. You've got a democracy if you can keep it, right? Elijah Cummings was, when we're dancing with the angels, we will want to know that we did all we could to protect our democracy. So, to see the vision, to see what can be unburdened by what has been. And she said, and I stand on their shoulders. And while I may be the first woman in this office, I will not be the last, because every little girl watching tonight sees this is a country of possibilities. And to the children of our country, regardless of your gender, our country has sent you a clear message. Dream with ambition, lead with conviction, and see yourselves in a way that others may not, simply because they've never seen it before, but know that we will applaud you every step of the way. And that doesn't just go for children. Where there's breath, where there's life, there's hope, there's purpose. Doesn't matter how old we are, we can work for our goals. We make the most. Jane Fonda's out there kicking ass in her 80s and talking about the last third of life, like she talked about who she was from 0 to 29, who she was from 30 to 59, and then who she is, from 60 to 90, and may she live to 100. So Vice President-elect Harris also said, now is when the real work begins. The hard work, the necessary work, the good work, the essential work to save lives and beat this pandemic, to rebuild our economy so it works for working people, to root out systemic racism in our justice system and society, to combat the climate crisis, to unite our country and heal the soul of our nation. I've said before, but on September 22nd, Number 45 had signed an executive order that made my job illegal. The teaching of diversity and inclusion, teaching about race and racism, teaching about gender and sexuality, and teaching about sexism and homophobia and transphobia, made all of that illegal. I'm trying to learn to run a graduate program in diversity and inclusion at Rowan University. And I have been teaching in this field since 2004. And he made it all illegal and set up a reporting mechanism. And now, with this election, my job is saved. But there's other things we still need to work for. We need to continue praying and visualizing and donating and talking on our social media for the Senate. So this is for the Senate. In spirit of grace, we invoke your help with the Democrats having control of the Senate, the Republicans losing control of the Senate. In 2008, when the first black man was elected president of the United States, and he won't be the last, when President Barack Obama was elected, the forces of race and racism went into high gear. Within months, there was a Tea Party fully funded by nefarious sources, and then by the midterm, by 2010, the Republicans took control of the House and the Senate and tied President Obama's hands for 6 years. We don't need that. So what's happened in 2010 and 2016, when 45 is elected, in midterm 2018, there's enough of a blue wave that the Democrats took control back of the House of Representatives. But Mitch McConnell and the Senate were locked down under this Republican control, and all that Mitch McConnell has been doing for the past 4 years is putting judges from the Federalist Society into the federal courts and onto the Supreme Court. He has been refusing to have laws that are duly passed, bills that are passed in the House of Representatives, refusing to bring them to the floor of the Senate to be argued, debated, and voted upon. Sitting in the House of Representatives right now is already passed and waiting to go to the Senate is the Anti-Lynching Act that we've been working on since Ida B. Wells, right? We in the broad sense, those who work for justice. Is the Equal Rights Amendment, which we've been working on, which was a 97-year fight and was fully ratified this January, should have been entered in as the 28th Amendment to the Constitution in January by someone named the archivist, and William Barr stopped him with Trump, Barr, whatever, stopped him. It went to the House of Representatives. The House passed a bill to move it forward to the Senate to be voted to remove there was a deadline put on it, and it's the only amendment to the U.S. Constitution that ever had such deadline put upon it. And so to remove that and let it be entered into the Constitution, having been ratified by 38 states. Okay, so that's sitting there. There's a Reform of Policing Act. It's not enough, but it does outlaw chokeholds and carotid, whatever, all those, it outlaws. It also sets, calls for a national registry of police officers who abuse their power, who are found to have abused their power, not willy-nilly, but found to have abused their power, so they can't just go a few towns over and get another job if they've been fired for abuse of power, right? So there's things. There's a John Lewis Voting Rights Act, teeth back in the Voting Rights Act. There's all sorts of things sitting in the House of Representatives. There is a stimulus package sitting there with money to re-up the unemployment, and with what we had till that ended with July, right? There's been a stimulus package to help small businesses that the Republicans have blocked. They'll get on and say Nancy Pelosi blocked it, but if you look at the facts, no, actually Mitch McConnell blocked it, Donald Trump blocked it, and Steve Mnuchin have been blocking it. So all of those things are waiting. We need the Senate. Or we're back to just being executive orders, one president making them, the next president undoing them, the next president making more executive orders. We need the Senate. So there are 2 runoffs in Georgia in January. We need those 2 seats. We need those 2 men to win. Anybody in Georgia, get them to vote in those runoffs. We need that change. And so also, you can donate to those campaigns. Their names are escaping me, but they're an easy Google away. And it's Reverend Warnock. It was John Lewis's pastor, and he was John Lewis's pastor, and it is John Osikoff. So you can go to their web pages and donate to them. We don't know at this moment how 45 will handle his vindictiveness. So we do know him to be actively vindictive, and we've observed that especially across these past 4 years. It's actually part of what his followers have loved about him. He has been performing a particular brand of hyper angry, hyper masculinity that is come down to us. It's like the John Wayne loner, big tough guy, maybe not all that bright, but solid and there for America. And yet the whole time he's been giving money to the corporations. The first stimulus package was stolen. Much of it was stolen. We had the re-upping for the unemployment, but much of what was there for small businesses was stolen by large corporations, like the minute they could do it, before the small business could get signed on to the website to apply. So the things that were meant to keep our restaurants and our pubs and our gymnasiums from closing, from going bankrupt, that money that would have allowed them to float themselves while we got the pandemic under control was stolen by the hyper-rich. There really is a 1% in the United States and a 99%. There's a handful of people at the top who are making themselves wealthier and wealthier. It's been progressing since Ronald Reagan. It's a whole thing, and it's much too much to get into right here, but I teach about it in my classes when I teach about socioeconomic class status, and we use census data, and I demonstrate and prove this fact, right? And so overwhelmingly, probably no one from the 1% will ever listen to me, but overwhelmingly, we are not those people. We may be middle class, we may even be upper middle class, we may be working class, we may be working poor. However, we may identify ourselves, and sociologists have found that most Americans think of themselves as middle class, whether they're a little high in that category or a little lower in that category economically. We tend to think of ourselves in that light, but none of that is the kind of wealth, the kind of obscene wealth taken from the people by the hyper wealthy, and everything that 45 has done has fed that. The tax bill he passed didn't help you and me, didn't intend to help you. And they gave us a little chunk of change the first year, and then all of it went to the hyper wealthy, right? It's not a tax break for you and I. And so, anyway, all of those things need to happen. And, as Vice President Harris pointed out, the real work begins, right? John Lewis talked about getting in good trouble, but the real work begins to beat the pandemic, to get this under control so I can get back in a live classroom, to get this under control so that we can hug our grandchildren more freely without making them wear a face mask or pull their t-shirt up over their nose to hug me, and just, I can't not hug them, but I have, I babysit them. My daughter needs me to do that so she can work and, all of that. But just to have our lives back. I haven't used 3 tanks of gas since March. Like, it's just, I was using a tank and a half a week. Not that I want that bill back, but I do want that bill back. Actually, I'd like an electric car. I'd like them to be all electric. I'd like to be able to buy a slightly used electric car for a good price in a couple of years. It would be great. To rebuild our economy so it works for working people. She talked about rooting out systemic racism and combating the climate crisis, right? Like saving our planet so we can have our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren have full lives, be able to live out, to live, to my age and beyond, right? We want them to be able to survive. We owe the ancestors and we owe our descendants all of this. So we did it. We voted and we made that count, and we voted at great sacrifice. We stood in long lines. We stood in the heat and the cold and the rain. We did what we had to do. We mailed our ballots. We waited in long lines just to put them in a ballot box. We did stuff, right? We called our friends and our neighbors. We made sure we drove people to the polls. We did all that we could, all that we had to do to help this. And Philadelphia was huge, so kudos to everyone local to me in all of this. But we need to continue. We're pressing for the Senate. We're pressing for the bills that have passed the House of Representatives to come to the floor of the Senate with a chance of being heard and passed. Why don't we have an anti-lynching act in 2020? Why are there no teeth in the Voting Rights Act? They were taken out, right? Why don't we, come on, really? Why don't we have an Equal Rights Amendment? Women are not, if you're an originalist, women are not included in the U.S. Constitution. And without that amendment being added, with being put in there by the archivist, there's all sorts of things that can be done unjustly to you. I recommend the movie Equal Means Equal, available on Amazon. But anyway, so we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what people might act like that feel like they've lost, that have lost their cult leader, and and what that looks like. So, the next few weeks could be a little hairy. We've got approximately 2.5 months till we're at Inauguration Day, but we know that on Inauguration Day, it's a done deal. He's got too many electoral, they're real votes, they're legitimate votes, they were properly counted, there were closed-circuit cameras filming the whole thing. There were Republican and Democratic observers watching every ballot be opened. There were the proper poll observers. They weren't supposed to be men in rifles without masks. They were supposed to be the people duly designated, but there were people from each party and cameras, and each vote was inspected. All of it was done properly. Whatever court cases lie ahead, they have no legal legs to stand on. No way that anybody can foresee, that being a takeover event. And so we don't know what this is going to play out like. But then there's another piece that we have to think of, and this is the other piece. We're going to have to get used to slow news days. Maybe not till January 20th. But from January 20th on, there'll still be a pandemic, but Biden's team has already been working and set up the groundwork for their pandemic response team. They've already been working on the work of transition, especially this week after the numbers began to roll in Wednesday, and it was clear that the mail-in ballots were going, in our case 81% Biden. It was clear it was going to be a done deal, and they got busy. So they're at work. So that's going to happen, and then things are going to kind of calm down. Instead of a daily, oh my God, what now? instead of every day checking the news feed to see what happened and who, and what he did and what he said and what new horrific thing, like that was completely un-American and completely undemocratic and broke every norm and every moray that we have. Like, what new thing is going on? Like, we have to get past that. So back in the day, so I have a book over there, I Trusted You Fully and Honestly, speaking of gendered assault. And back in the day, early on at 19 years old, I ended up in an abusive relationship. I ended up in a particularly verbally abusive relationship. And in an emotionally abusive relationship. And in a whole just sort of roller coaster ride of emotions. And it becomes addicting. There's a psychological effect in abuse. So an abuser sweeps in and sweeps you off your feet, pays attention, knows if you like peas or lima beans or not, like listens to every word you say, and behaves in certain ways that make you feel seen and loved and known. And then once they've got you, they begin to change. And then they act out, and then they're sorry, and then you forgive them, and then they act out, and then and you begin to spin through this wheel, this cycle of abuse that they talk about in domestic violence work, right? And you begin to, but there's a psychological mechanism to that known as intermittent pairing. And so you actually become addicted to the cycle. You become addicted to that honeymoon period where they're so sweet again and they're bringing you flowers and they're sobbing at you. They're down on one knee in front of you, tears running down their face, telling you how sorry they are that they did this thing and they'll never do it again. And you want to believe it because you want to make it better. You want to keep this good person. You want back the good person before, they acted out. And so you're in this space and you get caught and trapped in that. And then I got out of that relationship. And it took a minute. It was actually like a 2.5-year ride, but I got out of it. And thank you to the friends who actually I actually had 2 friends who visited and kind of took me aside and said, we think she's abusing you. Like, this is not okay. And if you can get your plane fare, your train fare out of here and back where we're at, then, we have a room you can rent. We've got some people, we've got a job set up for you. Like that. I had some friends who actually intervened in my life. And it still took me weeks and weeks. There was stuff. I tell the story in there. It's called Midnight Train Home. But in my book, I Trusted You. But that memoir, right? And so, and I get out of there. And then it's really weird because I'm so used to, it's like if you work in an ER too, like you get that adrenaline rush when there's a call that comes in telling the ER staff that somebody's coming in coded from a heart attack or somebody's coming in, in some really, like car accident or whatever. You can watch. I was a security guard in a hospital, stationed in an ER, but way back in the day, but. In that space, right? They just spring into action and the adrenaline flows through the place and everybody is like on it. And then, like on the quiet nights, like it's okay, but there's you get kind of addicted and you're always waiting. You always know it's going to happen again. There's going to be another accident. There's going to be another heart attack. There's going to be somebody else coming in and you're going to get to snap back into action again. And so at the end of that abusive relationship, as I got out of it, it was like a little disconcerting. But then I get, okay, I'm doing me. I'm getting used to being alone. I'm recovering my sense of self. And then I ended up in a relationship, and kudos here to the man I was married to for 24 years. He came along, and he was sweet, and he was kind, and he was a gentleman, and he opened my door, and he, waited weeks to get, pushing to get frisky. And he gave me space and time, and he started to win my heart, and I just, and it was good. And it was good there's reasons for the end, but it was really had a solid window of time in which we were really, really friends. And he was kind. And he's still kind. And, and people love him. And he and I, I care about him. I love him. He's like an extra brother to me, right? He's like my 8th brother. I made his 19th birthday cake. There's a long history there. We raised children together. There's stuff, and we're amicable, and we see each other. My daughters can invite him to the holidays, and we can be there in the same space, and it's not weird, right? And so, along came this gentleman and you know, and I won't say he never developed any issues with masculinity that got on my nerves, but you know, but there was just this solidity to him and to the relationship. And I found myself not okay with being treated well. I found myself at first bored. And then I found myself like he'd like to hold hands or put his arm around me. And I was like, okay, enough. Like, and I, you know, like, okay, you can sit next to me, but like, do you have to be touching me constantly? And I kind of had to talk to my head. I had to go, wait, you know, Nadine, what are you doing? Like, this is nice. This is good. You know, this is fine. This is like what you want. Like, you have to, and I had to like tell my parents weren't very touchy-feely either, right? So I hadn't grown up with a lot of hugging or you know, whatever. And then here's this guy and he just wants to hold my hand all the time and put his arm around me. And I had to make myself relax into it. And I had to talk to myself and say, just sit still. Let him leave his arm around your shoulder. Just sit still. Just, and then I got used to it. And one of the sweet things across the entire journey was I could be cooking in the kitchen or whatever, and he could pass me and touch my shoulder, and it was just nice to be physically affirmed in that way, right? And it was, when he didn't have health crises, it was a slow news day most of the time. And I came to love the slow news day. There's nothing more wonderful than a day when the world is not threatening to fall apart. There's nothing more. Remember not having a pandemic? Remember what it was to have leadership, to have a president who had it? Like, I didn't agree with everything Obama did. I'm actually not on the page of most Americans when it comes to foreign policy, whatever. But as far as domestic policy, as far as the way his leadership for 8 years affected my lived experience, he evolved on the marriage equality question. He went from, you know, like all the Democrats at that point in time were all going, well, maybe civil unions, well, maybe domestic violence, no, not marriage. And he evolved. He's like, you know, my daughters talk to me, and I can say, okay, you know, and like, yes, I support marriage equality. And he evolved in that way, right? Things got better. George W. Bush and a lot of bankers and a mortgage fraud thing took us into the Great Recession of 2007, 8, 9, and 10, because that thing lasted more than a year or two. Took us into this Great Recession, and we were in terrible, terrible financial straits in the United States. And people I knew people were losing their houses. My students were having to drop out of classes. Things were just breaking apart around us. You know, I had a summer where it was almost impossible to pay my bills. It was just awful. And when Barack Obama came in, I wasn't so happy about him doing the bailout for the banks. On the other hand, I don't know that much about that. And maybe, you know, he stopped the banks from failing. If the banks had failed, it might have been the 1930s, and so maybe he did. But George W. had actually set all that up, and Obama just signed on it because it was being that bank bailout was put together at the end of George W.'s presidency. And, you know, but he got us out of it. And he built back the economy. And we hadn't fully recovered. When I checked the census data, we had not fully recovered in even 2015 from where we had been, you know, in 2000. Well, in census 2000, but where we had been when this is happening. So, you know, but we were much, much better off, and we were starting to be okay, and it was starting to feel hopeful and normal, and people's 401ks were coming back, and life was getting back to normal before this next presidency. So do you remember what it was to have leadership that cared about you, or that cared about the good of America and the American people? We're going back there. And you know, I was down with Sanders and Warren in the primaries, but because I need student loan debt forgiveness badly. But we're going back there, and we're going to have leadership, and we're going to have two real leaders. I believe Vice President Harris will be a really active vice president. And so we're going to be in good hands. And that means we're going to have to get used to slow news days and pressing for our civil rights to make sure that the Biden-Harris leadership hears us and does the things we need. They promised to do most of the things that we need. Most of the things I wanted Sanders or Warren for have become kind of mainstream. It's not radical left to make sure there's a public option on health insurance, and it is not radical left to have a minimum wage that is somewhere closer. It's still not enough, and it's not radical left to have health. It's just health care and debt forgiveness. I mean, those are just things. Those are the kinds of things that made the middle class, the kinds of policies that FDR and Johnson put into play in the New Deal and the Great Society programs. It's the kind of bring back that can bring us back from the brink of financial disaster. So because we have this change, we'll get the pandemic under control. And because we have this change, we're not going all the way into the deepest depths of where the pandemic is taking our economy. I mean, it's still going to be hard, but it's not going to be what it was. Left the way things, if the things had gone the other way, the herd immunity idea was setting us up for more than 6.4 million deaths in the next year. We're going to be hitting about 500,000 deaths by the time we get to, where's my COVID stats? By the time we get to January 20th. But so this week, in the globe, in the planet, there were 50,700,000 new cases. And 1,261,000 people died. 1,261,000. That is 63,000 people who died this week on our planet Earth, fellow human beings who died of COVID-19. It's an increase for the week of 4 million, almost 4,500,000 new cases. When we bring it back to the United States, our week average was 1,007,000 cases, approximately 1,006,972 cases per day that we averaged, which is up 57% from 2 weeks ago. We're averaging more, our new case count is up 57%. We haven't done 57% more testing in the last 2 weeks. We also are at we had 126,000 new cases yesterday, November 7th, in the United States. So the United States now has 10,263,000 cases of coronavirus diagnosed. People who got tests could get tests. So 10 million, almost 300,000. And as of, I use NCOV, NCOV 2019 .live, but that COVID tracker has us this afternoon at 5 p.m. has us at almost 244,000 deaths in the United States. So we have things still on our plate, things that we need to take care of, things that need to be brought under, but at that current rate of over 1,000 people dying per day, at that current rate of new cases, we're still looking at the next 2.5 months. Biden and Harris cannot do the things they will do to bring the pandemic under. So for 2.5 more months, it's going to continue to rage out of control, unhandled. Also, for the next 2.5 months, flu season is coming in to meet COVID, and so we're entering into that part of that Dr. Bright, Dr. Fauci, Dr. Redliner have all warned us would be perhaps the darkest winter in American history in the sense of, numbers of deaths, right, in the United States, and numbers of cases, numbers of people sick. I know myself teaching, I know that I had some COVID cases among my students in the spring and among, clients of my spiritual counseling practice. I know that in the summer that was true as well. I knew about 56 people who had contracted COVID by the end of summer, beginning of the school year, and about 12 people who were dead from COVID, but most of them were older. But that's not okay. I'm older. I have 30 years to go. I got to stay and fight, right? I have another third of my life. But also, my students this term, I know what my university's COVID tracker says are the cases on campus, and I know how many of my students have indicated to me or to the university, and I've gotten an email from the university to have indicated that they have had or have COVID-19 this fall term. And we're remote mostly. I'm remote. Some of them are on campus. But in that space, I also have, been informed by students that many students are getting tested off campus so that they can ignore the quarantine restrictions if they so choose. So there's a lot more cases. There's probably, we're probably counting 1/3 of what's happening at the university. And so just speculation on my part, but I know both of those factors are in play. What the university is counting and what my students are telling me about getting counted in ways the university doesn't know. So we still need to do some visualizing. So we rejoice tonight. We have had not just a great victory, not just a success, we've had a victory that was absolutely critically essential. If we had not had this outcome, we would not be a democracy ever again. But we have recovered our democracy. We voted out an authoritarian leader with fascistic tendencies. We voted him out rather than needing to go to war. So it's like if the German people had arisen and voted Hitler out. It's essentially what's happened here. He loved dictators. He thinks like a dictator. He was talking, I heard with my own ears him say in, the televised clip of a campaign rally just this summer. He was actually like a month and a half ago talking about 12 more years and talking about a Trump dynasty after him, children after child after child. No intention of conceding, no intention of a peaceful transfer of power, no intention of following the rules of democracy, of even counting all of our votes. So we did a great thing, and without it, we would have really been hurting. But we still need the Senate. We need the pandemic brought back under control so we can get back to life. We need science to be honored and listened to in regard to the pandemic, in regard to our climate. We need to get used to slow news days. We need to, and we need, even as we get used to it and we know we've got real honest leadership happening, hopefully for 2 terms, and hopefully for 2 of, I would love to see Vice President Harris become President Harris for 8 years also. But, whatever is up ahead, we know we're going to have good leadership for a good window of time. But in this space, we need to recognize that we still need to visualize and we still need to be politically active and politically engaged. So I want you to just think for a moment as we begin. I'm switching my hats now. I'm going from the sociologist, rejoicing sociologist, into the rejoicing minister. And so in my spirituality, in my spiritual belief system, I believe in an afterlife. I believe in a divine. I believe in I believe my mama shows up and I feel her sometimes. I believe in the ancestors. I also believe that as we visualize, that it actually is a creative force. So I believe in something called manifesting. It's my spiritual belief system. And I believe in affirmations. I believe the words of our mouth have power and the visualizations of our hearts have power. And that they do create. And you may or may not be of that mindset, but visualizing is this simple. I'm saying to you the word right now, black dog, and an image of a black dog popped up in your mind. I don't know what yours looks like. Mine looks like a Labrador Retriever, but he was only about half size because his mama was short. We knew his daddy was a black lab, but he kind of was about the size of an English setter, and he pointed at ducks and things in the lake. Anyway, his name was Marcus. But that's who I picture, right? But you pictured a black dog of some kind. If I say yellow tiger, you also have a mental image. That is visualization, just that level. If I ask you where are the condiments in your refrigerator, you can see it in your mind's eye. I know right where the ketchup and the relish are, right? You know where things are. In your mind's eye, you see it. When we use words, they create mental images for us. So now I would like you to join me in creating, to continue to create our mental image. We've been doing this. I began this weekly early in the pandemic. We are doing this. We are intentionally creating an image. So if you just allow yourself in your mind's eye, you can close your eyes or you don't have to. I always do. But just begin to picture in your mind's eye. Take a breath and visualize that as you are breathing in, you're drawing in peace and relaxation and those slow news days that are coming. And as you exhale, you are releasing all the tension, especially the tension of these last 4 years. And with each breath, you continue to breathe in peace and to release tension, to let your adrenaline go down, to let the cortisol decrease, just allowing yourself a sense of feeling centered back in your body, confident, relaxed. And in this space, in your mind, see with me the United States, that vision Vice President-elect Harris talked about, that vision that women have had of an America that lives up to its promises, that people of color have had of pressing in to the ideals of liberty and democracy for all, liberty and justice, being created equal, being endowed by our Creator with inalienable rights, having those rights validated and justified, having freedom of speech and a free press, and having the freedom to have a religion or not to have a religion. No state religion, freedom. Picture that vision. Draw into your mind an America that lives up to its promise, unburdened, as she said, by what used to be, by what lies before. We know it, we face it, we teach it, we analyze it, we know, we view it historically, and now we take today and we move forward as the descendants of those who fought for our rights. We pick up the baton and we race forward to pass the baton on to the next generation and the next and the next. But we do our part of the run first. See yourself picking up the baton of democracy and continuing to call your legislatures, your legislators, and continuing to write letters and to write op-eds and letters to the editor and to send emails and to let the representatives know and to tell people, to tell other people that we believe in liberty and justice and inclusion for every person in America. And see with me an America that has teeth in its Voting Rights Act, that includes women in the Constitution, through the ERA being recorded as the 28th Amendment now, that has passed at the Senate level a law, an anti-lynching act, and an act that mandates that police not abuse their power. See those changes. See a House and a Senate and a White House that stand behind freedom, that stand behind student loan debt forgiveness, at least a reinvigoration of the Obama plans for 10-year forgiveness for income-based repayment, and 10-year forgiveness if you work for the government or a nonprofit, and 20 years if you work in a corporate space, in a for-profit space, but see at least that restored and acted upon. See that increase in minimum wage for those businesses. The mandate for $15 minimum wage is for businesses with over 50 employees. See that it's not going to hurt the small business if you've got 1 or 2 employees. It's about those businesses that are making profits that can afford to pay human beings. See a shift, see a change, see that money, that air quotes dark money in politics that is, being there, that is unmarked and unnoted, that where billionaires and corporations have been able to just funnel millions of dollars in to buy politicians and lobbyists to buy politicians. See that changed, and changed now. See the Congress of the United States, the House and the Senate, undoing the things that the bad SCOTUS rulings, undoing the Shelby County versus Holder, undoing Citizens United. See those things being turned back. See a law passed in the House and the Senate that undergirds the right of same-sex, same-gender couples to marry and to have full citizenship rights. See a law passed. We haven't had an Employment Non-Discrimination Act for LGBTQ people, and we don't have it in Pennsylvania. We don't have it at the federal level. This summer, the SCOTUS ruling said Ruth Bader Ginsburg, one of her last acts was to include gay and trans people under the 1964 Civil Rights Act, but with this new change in SCOTUS, see a law passed in the Congress of the United States that guarantees that people who are LGBTQ cannot be discriminated against legally by their employers, but that they have the right to not be harmed or fired for being themselves. See all the changes that we need. See everything that's been threatened, reinforced by the Congress. See everything see changes made to balance the Supreme Court. It's already been packed. It was packed by Mitch McConnell. It's been packed over these past 4 years with hundreds of federal judges and 3 SCOTUS picks that are opposed to civil rights for Americans. See a balance brought to that by whatever way. We don't have to tell the universe to do it. Just see it. See a Supreme Court that makes rulings that affirm the rights of human beings in the United States. See a path to citizenship for the dreamers, for the people brought here as children who haven't been able to have one, and see a real reform to the Immigration Act by the Congress that gives a path to citizenship for every undocumented person in America. That there's a way to get a green card, that there's a way. See our asylum courts serviced and revitalized. See a way to seek asylum if you're coming from a country where your life is a threat and you're begging the United States to grant you asylum because you're going to lose your life. See an America that is again compassionate, not letting in terrorists, but letting in mothers and fathers and children running, fleeing for their lives. Hard workers. Our immigrant populations are always, when our parents and grandparents and great-grandparents were the immigrants, they worked hard. Incoming people work hard. See immigrants having their rights and the opportunity to seek asylum, to seek a green card, to have a path to citizenship. The Biden-Harris ticket has promised to do their best to restore those over 500 children to their parents. Some of the children have been lost. Some of the parents have been deported. See that campaign promise fulfilled and those children restored to their parents, and see no more children taken from their parents at the border. See an end to this egregious sin on our nation. this horror. See the children that are still in those cages, that are still in detention. See them reunited with the closest family possible for them, their own families, their extended families, their parents. See those children restored. See a change. Because tonight, as we sit here, there are children still in detention centers. See an end to the detention of immigrants and migrants to our land, where their reproductive organs were being taken out and they were being sterilized. See an end to the egregious horrors, not unlike the genocides of other times and places, not unlike the concentration camps that we put Japanese Americans into, not unlike the horrors committed in Germany, not unlike. Just see it stopped. It's ridiculous that in this century the United States committed this crime under this administration. See it turned. See an America that you're proud to be part of. See us, see systemic racism addressed, faced, rooted out. See change. And also, in this moment now, see a beam of protective light wrapping you and your family, keeping you and those you most love and most need, your nearest and dearest, your family, your friends, your significant other, your children, your grandchildren, your siblings, your parents, your grandparents, great-grandparents, whomever you've got in your world. See them protected as this pandemic finishes passing over us. See yourselves do all that science says. Wear your mask, wash your hands, use Purell, socially distance. Continue through the holiday seasons ahead to be wise and to use your wisdom. But in this space, in this moment, see a wall of divine protection. See yourself wrapped in a bubble of, like a force field of protection. And I see with you, you and yours, coming out on the other side when this has passed over us, re-emerging as the image of Noah coming out of the ark after the storm has raged and it's taken time to settle, and the ark has finally come to rest on the top of Mount Ararat, and finally the dove that's sent out of the window doesn't return because it found a place to rest, brings an olive branch back or a budding leaf back, and then goes away and doesn't return. See the moment when we can come back out of semi-quarantine, the state that we're in right now. See us doing what it takes if we have to quarantine again, but the money being there to keep us afloat as we do that. See the PPE being there. See whatever's happening this November, December, January, February, March. See all that we need. You and yours, me and mine, our neighbors, our friends, our co-workers, our loved ones, our area, our counties, our states, our nation, our nations. See us all having all we need. And I see you and yours, and I see me and mine, all still alive, embodied, healthy and well, when this has passed over us. If you have experienced COVID and have any lingering effects, we agree with you, we envision for you, all of us collectively, we envision your complete recovery. Even if it takes time, we see you restored to health. If you have it now, we see you restored to full health. If you do not have it, we see you and yours successfully avoiding getting it. And we see the new administration doing what the doctors say, putting epidemiologists and virologists at the front of the pandemic response, bringing it under control, and leading us into a new normal. And standing up for the environment so that we stop losing forests, so that we stop polluting, so that we stop warming, so that we go back to a world where pandemics become less likely instead of more likely. Just take a moment and feel the peace, the quiet of late spring and summer, when the case counts are coming down and the deaths are actually going down, not just down to 1,000 or 500 a day, but all the way down. When there is the most successful vaccine possible, just envision a miracle. We can let the universe handle how it happens, but just see real treatments, real immunity, real quality vaccine, scientifically tested, proven, clean, safe, reliable, effective. And with me, I hear the peace, falling asleep at night, sleeping soundly, no more nightmares, waking in the morning, riding peacefully back out into the world, into our jobs, into our places of employment, businesses rebounding, life able to move forward, wearing masks as we need, but just moving forward, back into a space where the world becomes sane again. Just feel the peace. Hear the quiet. See America again, a world leader, rejoined to its allies, not its enemies. Feel the feeling of having a democracy of the people, by the people, for the people, and you and yours, and me and mine, alive and well to see it. Until next Sunday at 7. Be well. I don't really know how to see the comments. I appreciate that they've been rising and that there have been comments and visitors, and it's lovely. So I don't know what I'm doing, but I also have to do it from my iPad. I've got a MacBook, but the cameras stink. Why would Apple do that? Anyway, so be well, be blessed. And if anybody did put any questions in a chat, I will do my best to address them next time. And so thank you so much. And yay! We're going to survive all of this. To you.